First Class Counselors, where we give camp counselors insider tips and advice on how to make a camper summer the best it can be.
And whether you are brand new to the camp world or you've got a few years under your belt, self improvement and a growth mindset are built into the core DNA of every great staff member, or dare we say it, first class counselor.
So my name is Oliver Gregan. My pronouns are he, him. I'm the executive director at YMCA Camp Winona in DeLeon Springs, Florida.
And my name is Matt Wilfred. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm the director of overnight programs for Campfire Circle. We're an organization that brings the camp experience to kids and families affected by pediatric cancer and serious illness.
And today's show is about something that you will hear the camp director say over and over again. In fact, if you haven't heard this saying, it's probably because you haven't done your interview yet. You probably even will see this on all of the job descriptions and everything. And that is
Were you waiting for
campers
me?
come
You was
first.
that you were waiting
Oh,
for me, too?
no, no, it's that campers come first, you guys. And that's really what the priority is that when we're at camp, it's not the counselors who come first. It's not nap time comes first. It's not winning and Gaga comes first, whatever it might be. And it's the campers. And we're going to talk about that today because it's a skill set. It's something that you can work on and build, of course, like any other skill in the camping world. But also, it is an important part for every counselor to understand if you're ever going to become first class. So, this is a great podcast for those who are starting to think about becoming a counselor, or maybe those who are a counselor and just need that refresher, that reminder to themselves to be intentional and make sure their campers come first. So, Matt, tell me a little bit about what you think about when you hear that saying that you've heard 100 times come from a camp director, which is, hey, put your campers first. It's all FTK out here for the kids.
That's right. Well, I was gonna say there's many different ways that people put this, right? They say FTK, which stands for the kids, putting campers first, the why of summer camp, and whatever you call it, it's not only the core of like what we do, it's in everyone's job description, but it's also why we do it. So in this episode, we're going to talk about the why behind it. What's the philosophy behind it, and why is it important? Because it's not intuitive. There's not many jobs like when you work at McDonald's. Yeah, they say that like it's customer first, but we all know why you're there. You earn a paycheck, you clock in, clock out. But summer camp is unique, and this is one of the reasons for that. So we'll do that, and then we're also going to like make sure we do the gut check behind like what does it mean to put campers first? Is it a sacrifice? I don't know. And we'll also talk about what it actually looks like. So we'll give you some of the practical tips that we know that people come to this podcast for. They want to hear, well, how do we do it? We don't just want to talk about it. So, but I think this is important for counselors to hear because this is what is going on in your camp director's head. They have internalized this message, hopefully, over many years of working at camp, and it's just comes second nature. But we know that it's not second nature to everybody, and we want to help everyone get there. So that's why we're doing this podcast to get everyone on the same page and then give you some advice on how to make sure that you're keeping kids at the center of what you're doing at camp. So let's break it down and start with the philosophy. What goes into our mindset when it comes to camper first philosophy? Oliver, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah. I think it's really important, and some things that I just want us to have right off the bat as kind of our fine print. Campers come first, but that does not mean that you come last.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, do make sure that you are in a position to take care of yourself so that you can take care of others. And we'll get a lot more into this when we get down the line. But right off the bat, I don't want someone thinking there this entire show that was like, well, what if I'm not taking care of myself? What if I'm not getting my needs? Do I really put campers first? I was like, no. You need to make sure your needs are met. That's 100% part of it. But understanding too, like down the line, you are going to have to know that you're putting 10 kids whose life, happiness, well-being is in your care. So they are for the success of not only their experience at camp, but for yours too, is putting them first and understanding what it means to, not be the priority all the time. So that's a really huge disclaimer I want to put out there for everyone who's listening to the show.
Mm-hmm.
But this camper first philosophy, I put in my show notes something really quick and really easy and it's important for you, but explaining it might take a second. It's called the math of caring. And I think this is what sometimes sets camps apart. And we've talked about this probably on an earlier podcast, but I want you to do a little bit of math in your head, maybe on paper right now, as we talk about this aspect of putting campers first. Because the math of caring is about the amount of time that you put in towards a camper during the time that they're at camp, and understanding how much a difference that can make in the grand scheme of things. So, the first thing that you need to understand is the math of consistency over time. So, if we were stretching camp out over the course of an entire year per se, you would say, like, it's a lot of time in between, right? That consistency doesn't give one that like big punch that you would understand, and we know that we learn faster if we're consistent with it, right? Like, if I move to a foreign country and they're only speaking Spanish the entire time that I'm there, I'm going to learn to speak Spanish a lot faster than if I'm just doing one Spanish class for 1 hour every week, right? So that consistency over time is really important. So that's one thing. The next thing that's really important to understand is how much time you are actually putting in with your kids. So I like to do a little bit of a comparison here. So let's take, for example, a teacher, a very caring person in a kid's life, and how much time they spend with a kid over the course of 1 week, right? So let's say if your camper goes into school on, Monday, and they are in a classroom with their teacher from, 8 o'clock in the morning when classes start, and they're with them until about noon for lunch. So that's 9, 10, 11, 12 o'clock, we'll say lunch. And then they have an hour of lunch. Then their teacher might watch over that time, but then they'll 12 to 12:30, and then another hour and a half, maybe 2 hours of school left before 2:30, 3 o'clock rolls around. So you're looking at about 7 hours that if that kid is in that teacher's direct classroom, they're getting for 5 days a week. You get 35 hours of teacher time that teacher is invested in, right? But that teacher's main focus while that kid is in school is teaching them math, teaching them science, teaching them English, history, all this information they have to get into them so they're ready for the test or whatever might be coming that week, but also that they're ready for life as far as their intelligence is concerned, right? That's the main focus of a teacher. All right. Now let's flip it on to a counselor, right? Who maybe is just doing your traditional camp stuff. You're with that kid from when they wake up in the morning at, maybe sometimes 6 a.m., but hopefully not. But hopefully your kid is waking up and you're getting to your morning mission at about 8 o'clock in the morning. And then you're with that camper all day. And in fact, the only time you probably don't spend with your camper is maybe an hour or two that they go to their choice activity. And it's not your activity that you're with them for, right? Like, you might teach archery and your kid goes to canoeing with the lifeguard for a little bit of time. So you get that little bit of separation. You might get an hour off when you're, I don't know, say, taking your time off as a counselor during the day. But in the grand scheme, you're sleeping in the cabin, you're playing with those kids throughout the day, you're with them all the time. It's almost 20 hours that you're with that kid. Now, sometimes they're going to sleep during that time. So we'll take another 6 hours for sleeping, 14 hours that 14 hours that day that you're going to be actively invested in that camper's day and their life and everything that's going on. You're going through a lot of firsts with them, right? The first time they try to paddle a canoe, the first time that they have a big argument with a friend and they can't run away from it, but they have to handle it right there and then. That you do that 14 hours over the course of those 6 days, and you will instantly see how much more time you are invested in them during that time than a teacher is. So take that time and you're almost double what a teacher is. Not only that, but the teacher goes home at the end of the day. You're there for that camper when they go to sleep at night. You're there for them when they shower, all of their physical needs. You're there for them. If a kid has an accident, a teacher's sending them to the nurse. They're passing off that issue. You don't pass off the issue. You're there for them.
For sure.
All of that math of caring, your time doubles, right? What a teacher would do. And it's consistent and it's over that time. And its focus isn't on getting you ready for a test, but it's about getting you ready for life, about being that mentor, being that caring person in your life. And for me, that math of caring is how I teach my staff to understand how much of an impact they have of that short time of a week, that actually when you elongate it, compared to other role models in that camper's life, you're putting in more time than them in that period. So if you compare, we did teacher here, but do the same math for a coach, for maybe even a friend that they have, like another role model that's close to them. They might be in class with them, but they go home to their own home during the week. Maybe an after school specialist, maybe their drama teacher, right? Those positions in their life. But then the really surprising one is when you do parents. And the parent is scary because you have to think that a parent, the person who is with their kid since the day they are born until the day they turn 18 and kick them out of the house, right? That parent during a week of time does not get as much time as you think.
Right.
It may be an hour in the morning when they're getting ready for school. It may be an hour at dinner at night after they've picked them up from their extracurriculars and everything like that. Especially in Western culture where kids are, doing 3 extracurriculars after school every single time. They're not getting home until 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night. And then they got homework that they do on their own as well. And all of a sudden you start to realize that even parents have less time per week spent with their own child than you're going to get during that week. You have a huge impact on caring. And that's why when we're saying about putting campers first, to sum all this up really quickly, when we're talking about putting campers first, you have so much more time, so much more math in that aspect of just caring for kids and being for them that nobody else in their life is putting in regularly. So
Mm,
it's a huge, huge impact. Understand that, especially for those camps who may have a kid who's coming for the whole summer,
right.
right? How much you're there for that kid. So understand the math of caring. And when you put campers first, really, you're putting in more time than some of the biggest influences on their life, and you're doing it in a concentrated amount of time, right? Which means that it's going to have a much, much bigger impact than something that gets stretched over the course of a year. So that's my camp philosophy, and I think that's one of the most important things that I try to go over with my counselors. Matt, can you talk a little bit about what your camper first mentality is?
Yeah, I think Oliver, the math is really interesting behind that, and you're right. There's almost no place in the world where they're getting that kind of like consistent care for that long. It's astonishing. And your math thing, I actually switched mine in the show notes last minute here because the math reminded me of what my camp directors told me growing up, and that was 1 week. Our camp was 1 week. You had 7 days at camp, and then it was a changeover. But whether you call it 1 week or one session or one summer, I think about the camper who was like me when I was a 13-year-old, and camp was my place for me. I didn't really fit in well at school, but I knew I had camp to look forward to. My best friends were there. These camp staff that I knew really cared were there, and I was like counting down the days to get to camp. And our camp directors, when I was a staff, reminded us that summer camp, they said, "How long is summer camp?" And we would all be like, "Oh, it's like 9 weeks, and you have staff training, which is 10." They're like, "No, summer camp is 1 week." And we have to put our perspective we put ourselves in the shoes of those campers who this is their 1 week. This is their one chance at this extraordinary place where they're getting, like you said, Oliver, the math, it works out that they're getting this amount of attention and care and community, they might not get any other time in their lives or throughout the year. So we have to go in with that mindset, and that's why you think about like, oh man, it's Tuesday, here comes chicken burgers again. It's like, no, it's chicken burgers. This is kid might not get chicken burgers, or they win Gagaball. We let them win in camp games because it's their chance to be winners. And that's why just putting them at the top of everything we do is so important, because the summer, like the summer is long for us, especially long for camp counselors and camp staff, but it is short and precious for campers. So we need to do our best to honor that, and that's why we got to put them first.
Yeah, it's such an important thing, and you don't quit on them, right? Like you're there for them, right? Whether they win Gaga or not, like
Right.
right, that big moment, whether it goes well or it goes wrong, you're not going to run away from the situation. You don't really truly move on to the next situation. Yeah, you might say, all right, we'll go and play a different game, right? You might move on from that moment, but you're
Yeah.
with them as you do that, and it's um that consistency is such a key. That concentration is such a key. That concentration of time. So,
Yeah.
all right. So let me ask you a really quick big question here, Matt. What do you need to be prepared to put campers first? Like
Hmm.
what? what should you have in your counselor, your first class counselor pocket to be ready for it?
Well, I mean, you got to make the choice to do it, and I think that's we're going to talk these next little bit in the podcast. We're going to talk about that you have to commit to making a choice, and there is so many unique things about working at summer camp, and this is one of them. Is that you know we talk a lot in this podcast about what you gain from the summer camp experience, and you gain a lot. It is there are innumerable ways that you will grow and you will learn, and camp will set you up for the rest of your life. And there is no sugarcoating it. I always say to myself and to staff, I say that working at camp will be simultaneously probably the hardest thing you will ever do and the most rewarding thing you will ever do, especially for a job. It will definitely be the hardest job you ever have while being the most rewarding job you ever have. And those two things are equally true at the same time. And I don't want to like scare people off or anything. I really want people to come and experience camp. I think you should try it. And is it going to be hard though? Yeah, absolutely. So while I want people to come and experience it, I also want them to make the choice to know what they're getting themselves into. So our other episodes will help you with like the discerning process of what you want to do. But I think Oliver is going to share some stuff here, and then I know later on in the episode we'll get back to it. But do your research on what the camp is, what your expectations will be, but know that no matter what camp you're working at, the expectations are to put campers first. And whether they say it in the job description or they don't, that is the expectation that you are putting campers first. And at some camps, I've been to a couple camps. At some camps, it really like that isn't super clear. But at the camps that I think are really great, and B, to be a really great staff member, even at a camp that might not be so like camper centric in that way, you will excel as a staff member by putting campers first. So you will be great at a great camp or a not so great camp, but no matter what, you're gonna work hard if you put campers first. And it is not easy. And Oliver, tell them why it's not easy.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna go back to a point that I make all the time about judge is are you ready? And I talk about when you care for campers, it's mind, body, spirit, right? Those three
Mm.
things they make a really strong triangle. YMCA, we love our triangles, but they make a really strong triangle for you to understand. Are you ready for what you're gonna about to do? And if you're gonna put other people before yourself, it's understanding that you gotta have a strong triangle to keep that all together. So I'm going to kind of break down each one. So the first one I want to talk about is your mental health, right? Camp is not a place for your mental health and well-being to be unstable. Unfortunately, it's some camps might be a little bit more willing to work with you on it, but if you're easily overwhelmed, maybe you're susceptible to panic attacks, maybe you find yourself quick to anger, maybe you have a fair number of depressive episodes that stop you from operating, it might be really tough for you to say, hey, maybe camp is the place for me, because you have to be able to maintain yourself and then take care of other people and not just one other person. Typically, I mean, some camps you might be one on one with a camper or one on two, right? But you will typically have a cabin of 10 to 12 kids that you have to be able to sustain yourself during that time mentally and not become overwhelmed by difficult situations, right? Now, your mental well-being, that is you, that is your doctor, that is how you personally feel it and need to get through it. That is something that you should figure out. But if you're in a position in your life where you're struggling with it's a conversation you have to kind of have with yourself, a little bit more honesty. And to be fully honest, as a director now on our job descriptions and stuff, we put on there mentally capable enough to make it through the summer. And like, do you have that fortitude? And it's a difficult thing to talk about. Mental health is a really big struggle. But at the end of the day, I've had staff that have failed to keep campers safe because their mental health was not strong enough to keep themselves going. So they struggled with supervision. They struggled with making sure that their activities were safe because they prioritize their mental health over that of the campers' well-being and their programming and everything that was going on. So I really do want to emphasize you have to have a strong mental health. and know what that looks like, and be honest with yourself. Or maybe you need someone to be honest with you going into this, going into that summer. The next is your are you physically healthy, right? Different camps require different physical activity throughout it, right? If you're going to a sports camp, you probably want to have had played a sport before in your life. But generally speaking, most camps are physically active places. You're walking to and from places. Usually there's large campuses that you're on. And you need to be able to know that if you're sitting down 9 hours a day right now, maybe like your favorite activity is more watching Netflix and television during the day instead of maybe going and joining a pickleball league. A lot of people seem to really be enjoying that right now. You're probably going to start to physically struggle during summer. I've had a number of staff who have come to work at camp because they thought it was a place that they could just come and enjoy and this wonderful campy feel to it. And then, man, by the end of like the first like 3 days, they're sore. They're having trouble walking around. They are 20 minutes behind the group because they can't get up on time. They don't walk as fast as the group walks. Those hills are more daunting to them. They're not playing in activities, but sitting off to the side because they're just too tired to get through it. You need to understand what your physical health is, and having hopefully a healthy diet, regular motion. Those are important things to have, judging on what the camp needs for you. And then finally is, where's your spirit at? Maybe it's the rah rah that we all think about with summer camp, but are you just comfortable in the woods? Like, have you ever walked through the woods at night in the dark? Maybe your flashlight goes out and you got to get from one side of camp to the other. It can get a little bit scary, right? But are you a person who maybe is scared of bugs, and maybe it's a little bit of a struggle for you being outside and getting dirty, and maybe you go 2 days without showering? Is your spirit in it? Do you understand what it means to be at camp and be in that environment that camp might be asking you to be in? Like tent camping, maybe something you've never done. Now, with that being said, this is an area that I see the most staff maybe never having that experience before, and they come into camp and they find out that they can do it, right? I can't tell you the number of times that I have heard like the incident of the bug in the shower. And like, I've never dealt with bugs. I've never seen them before. I've never seen a cockroach like that. And that counselor like steps up, they catch the bug, they let it loose in the woods. They teach kids the value of not just killing anything that seems gross to them. And they're able to get through it because they realize, hey, I'm a role model. I need to put on that face. And that's kind of the final part is you are, you are the role model, and you put on this face almost 24/7 for these kids, and you maintain that throughout the whole summer. And for a lot of people, that is a struggle. So Matt, I know I've said some things. I usually say these are pretty difficult truths to try and say, but do you want to walk through some of like disclaimers and other things about this that you might want to add in?
Yeah, it's hard, and they're difficult things to talk about because we do care, we care so much about the mental health of the staff that work at camp. I mean, for you counselors listening to this, there are, like, when you go to a camp conference, when Oliver and I go to conferences, there are, like, out of the 100 sessions at a conference, I'd say at least 12 of them are dedicated to staff mental health, like and physical health, and we care about you as a staff member. We want to be very clear about that, and we're taking care of other people's kids, right? And those two things are not, they're not equal, but at the same time we have a responsibility to look the caregivers of our campers in the eye and say that we've got you, that the staff that we've chosen to hire, the staff that we have trained, are ready to take care of your kids. And they're gonna have to, you're gonna have to make decisions about how to care for kids when maybe they're not in their best moment. And if that's going to overwhelm you to a point where, again, you can't meet that threshold of supervision, then that is part of the job. Just, when you see a job description that says, like, need to be able to lift 50 pounds, they don't just put that in there because they want people who are physically fit. They put it in there because you're going to have to lift things that are 50 pounds. And I don't know if we've nailed it in the camp industry yet, of really laying out, like, need to be able to deal with a camper telling you they hate you. Need to like, must be able to, like, chase kids for at least 30 minutes on straight. But I joke about this, but I'm serious. you know, there are it is a uniquely challenging job, and it's not that we need people who are in their perfect, like this perfect triangle that Oliver's talking about, but again, we're taking care of other people's kids. And if you're just working on some of those things, and I know that mental health, there's a huge spectrum of severity when it comes to mental health disorders and things. So, and every case is so unique. So I don't want people to think that we're painting with a broad brush. But again, we're taking care of other people's kids. And, you know, if you're not sure and you don't feel comfortable, I know some people might not feel comfortable disclosing like mental health stuff, and you certainly don't have to in a lot of cases, or for accessibility reasons. But if you've never done it before, there may be a way that you can like get more information. I'd say, like, if you're not looking at the websites, maybe you could find some people on LinkedIn who had worked at the camp previously to get some more information about what the experience is going to be. Or maybe you could think about volunteering for a week. If maybe they have weekend programming, like our camp has weekend programs that sometimes people will come up and they'll be like, oh, I really love this, I want to do it for the whole summer. Or sometimes they're like, I was not ready for this, I do not want to do this for the entire summer, I will work at your day camp. Great, no problem. um, or I've also seen people who really aren't sure about the camp experience. Sometimes camps have jobs in other positions where you can use that to kind of get used to it. And if you've never worked at a camp before, working in the kitchen, working on the maintenance team, or work if there's like a day camp branch, as a way to kind of dip your toe in the water. There's trade-offs to that because the job is much different than hanging out with kids and playing with kids, but you will be like side by side with what's going on there. And I've seen almost every year that I've worked, there's a staff member who was like in the kitchen last year who is out running programs with kids because they love that side of it. And they're like, okay, I understand it now. So there are ways to kind of dip your toe into the water, because we certainly don't want to exclude someone from the camp experience if they think they would be great at it and they want to be camper first, but they have some barriers. And we think of it on a case by case basis. But I'll say it again, we're taking care of other people's kids.
Yeah. Yeah, I think those are great points. And you got to think about it in that grand scheme of things. Like, some jobs aren't meant for everybody. Not everybody is meant for this job, right? You have a skill set. If you're thinking right now of, man, Oliver and Matt are really calling me out right now for not being able to be a counselor. You have a skill set, all right, friend. You have something that you can provide. It may not be in the camp community. It may be in a different route in the camp community, right? But like, I understand what it means to be taking care of someone else's kids. Like, it's a lot, right? And there's almost more pressure on you than the parents put on themselves to take care of the kids at times. So
Mhm.
you need to understand that. You need to know what you're stepping into, and the mental health part of that, the spirit part of that, the physical part of that, and that triangle. It's still got to be a strong triangle. So I think, if you have questions and you're a little bit you think it's a little bit of a struggle and you want to know more, please reach out to Matt and I. We'll walk you through it. I want to make sure that you're ready to be a counselor for those kids and you can put them first. But also, if you're not, I can talk to you about what you need to do to maybe get to that position in the future. So um, let's talk about this. So, very scary stuff when you get to that camp and the expectations of it. But Matt, would you say that camp is a sacrifice, though? Are you sacrificing a lot when you decide to take on the camp job? So let me know what's your feeling on this one.
It's a spicy question. Um, I think it depends what you mean by sacrifice. And I think that if you are looking like very like myopically, like really up close, and you play the comparison game of like pay, hours worked, stress, hardship, if you looked at like that just on its own, it's a total sacrifice, 100%. But I mean, again, listen to our other episodes. I think the net gain, in my experience and the experience of a lot of staff members that I've worked with, they'll say that it's more than worth it for the ability to work on like changing a kid's life or provide this amazing experience, and the way you'll grow from it, the people that you'll meet, all of those things. I don't know if it's if overall that it's a sacrifice. But if you look at it compared to many other jobs out there, there's a lot of things that you might sacrifice to be a part of it. I don't know. Does that make me a fence sitter, Oliver, or are you on the same page?
Uh, I very clearly, I say in my show notes, yes. It is a sacrifice. You are sacrificing a lot, all right, and that needs to be understood by whoever's taking it, right? But it has to be accepted by the person who's taking on the job, right? You are not going to have the freedom of schedule that your friends have who are working scooping ice cream at the local ice cream shop, right? You are not going to maybe get paid as much as someone who's working a server job all summer and is getting some pretty big tips at the yacht club, right?
Right.
You you are going to miss out on things. But you know, want to know something really cool? Your friend who is working at the yacht club, who's going to tell you some stories about some like, businessmen who came in and tipped them $100 each or whatever it might be. Um, they're also going to be jealous that you spent your summer being a camp counselor. They're going to see the sacrifices that they made to be in their position where they did not get to do what you did all summer.
Right.
They did not have the impact you did. They just served some rich guys, right? And they walked away with an extra $100.
Right.
And that needs to be understood. Yes, it's a sacrifice because we as people will pretty much always look at the grass is always greener on the other side,
Yeah.
right? There is something that somebody else gets that we don't. And one is accepting that it's just part of life, right? There are positives and negatives in every route we choose. And I think the really important thing is here, you're doing a good thing, which means in some way you get to call yourself a martyr, right? You get to work these 160-hour weeks or whatever they are. You get to do it for the just cause of helping kids. And when you are in your 50s and someone is asking you about what job you did as a kid growing up, you'll say, "Hey, I put kids first." And I was a summer camp counselor and we had this amazing time and all this kind of stuff. It was really tough. It was hot in the sun. We had bugs. And by that time, we'll probably all be in like, what is it? Augmented reality or whatever. We'll just all have headsets on and just inside of the metaverse or whatever. But you will talk about those things that you got to do as a camp counselor. And at that point in time, you'll realize that sacrifice gives back. Giving something to sacrifice, giving yourself up for something that might feel like a greater cause than other things, right? Gives back to you in a way that will tenfold make you feel better about the thing that you were able to do. You will look back on what your co-counselors were able to accomplish in their lifetime because you were there and maybe you had a late night chat with them on the porch. So understand sacrifices do help out. They do make you a better person. They do give you a better memory sometimes. That's not to say you didn't struggle. It's not to say you didn't lose out on some money. It's not to say you didn't lose out on some time hanging out on a beach with some friends, doing a campfire, roasting hot dogs, and doing what a young 20-year-old does. But it does mean that you got to make this impact, and that sacrifice is worth it. So if we're agreeing with ourselves that we want to make that sacrifice, that it's now our time to go from, you know, I didn't know what I want to do with my summer to I want to be a camp counselor. I want to put campers first.
Right.
What are some of the things, Matt, that you've seen out of people who have made that decision do as counselors during the summer? What does it look like to
Mm.
actually do in practice?
Right.
What does it look like?
Yeah, and I just want to say one thing too, that I was talking with a staff member doing their like post summer interview, and we were talking about how some staff got really tired this summer, and we experienced some burnout with some people, and we were talking about how the people who really had this like camper first mindset were the people who like lasted the summer because their buckets were getting filled by the camp experience. They were there for the campers. They loved watching campers struggle or get through a struggle or, be amazing. So when you have that camper first mindset, I think it makes the job easier too, because the job is hard, but what makes it easier is like taking joy in that, like the camper first experience as well. But the practices that we see from counselors putting campers first. I think it goes into literally every part of the day. And I could, like, you could go through the camp schedule. Maybe we'll do that as another episode. We'll go through the camp schedule and be like, here's a reminder of a time where you can put campers first. But, I think about campfire. Like, for us, is at the end of the day, where a staff member chooses to sit at campfire. Do you sit with your co-counselor on the side and all your campers are in the middle? Do you sit like away for some reason at the top of the campfire pit? It drove me wild when I saw that this summer. I was like, why aren't, this is your chance. Like, you get to laugh and sing with kids. It is literally the easiest part of the job because all the entertainment's happening at the front. So, where you position yourself at the meal table, all of those things are about, like, how are you placing yourself, adding to the camper experience. And once in a while, you may need to sit at the end of the table and just dig your head into your taco for one meal. But the vast majority of the time, get in there and chat with kids. I think supporting kids' ideas is a way to put them first. And even if it's not as funny or as good, maybe like good, quote unquote, about, as what you could lead, let them lead. That's a big deal for them. Camp is it's for them and it's 1 week long. You'll get your chance to lead that game. I'm sure you will. But give this kid the chance to do it in their one camp experience. Um, Taking the time to get to know each camper and showing them that we know them. This is like this is the going back to your math thing, Oliver, that it takes. I remember I was a teacher, and it takes such a long time to get to know kids sometimes, if you're especially if you're like a high school, or in a school where they have different teachers throughout the day. It just takes a long time to get to know them. So I really appreciate when I see camp counselors, like, they have their cabin list memorized before the kids show up at camp. They're like, I have like Bobby, James, Daryl, Xander, and Jamal, and they are my campers. I know all these things about them already, and I've like designed the camp experience with them in mind. How amazing is it for that camper? But it takes some extra effort. It takes some first class effort. I think the ones who are really there for the campers are the ones who don't shy away from supporting the camper who's having a harder time, whether that's like a harder time behaviorally or socially. It's really easy to be the counselor out there throwing a ball with all the kids and being involved in the large group game, but it's different than noticing the kid who's sitting on the side, or like working on a craft or something like that, and you can help them throughout the week with that one thing, or help them make friends in those connections. And I think when you put kids first, you think about the kids that might need a little more help rather than the kids who are seemingly doing fine um, otherwise. And then finally, you know I think that working at camp is hard for all the reasons that we've that we've shared and we will talk about. But not complaining. I think people who put kids first, they don't complain specifically about the responsibilities surrounding working with kids. You may have a complaint about the food, or you may have a complaint about some things, and that it's okay to voice your concerns. I think never complain, but it's okay to voice those concerns. But if you find yourself complaining about the responsibility that you have to take care of kids, or like campers who need more attention, you're like, oh, this kid is just the worst. I don't know. I'm not sure if you're in the right position. I don't know if maybe you didn't listen to this episode, or you didn't fully understand what it meant to put campers first. And like I said, I think there is a strong, like, Venn diagram, and in the middle of that Venn diagram are the people who both like are at camp for the reason to put kids first and like to focus on the kids experience, and the people who are most satisfied in their job and most happy in their job. Oliver, what about you? What kind of things do first class counselors do when they're putting campers first?
I mean, first off, they do everything you were just talking about. So that really covers a lot of things. No, you have great points, right? And I don't want to repeat them, but they're putting that camper first comes from a lot of things. I think for me, a big one is that role modeling, right? Like, and it's very strange. Like I say, like when I go into counselor mode, right? Like I'm a different person. I'm not like the Oliver that is here or there. Like I'm like I go into camper first mode, right? And that means that I am this person that would be really hard to maintain 24/7. Like this positivity and like everything's great and we're just gonna works, that person, you have to understand that like it's gonna be weird to like get yourself outside of who you normally are, kind of be somebody else, but being that role model. And there's a lot that goes into that role modeling. It's not just like happy camp counselor, we're gonna be great, you guys. It's somebody who understands that like it's not just about today, but it's tomorrow. To who are we becoming? Like the cool thing about being a role model is kids are going to role model you tomorrow, right? They are going to learn that you care about honesty, you care about respect and responsibility and following through on things, right? Like your role modeling of bending over and picking up trash. Like, yeah, sometimes I'm tired and I don't pick up every bendo I see, every piece of trash on the ground, right? But in front of kids, I do, right? Every trash I do because I want them to understand that importance. And being that role model is so important, because it's going to help those kids know who they need to become, and that's going to make them better than me. And as a role model and as somebody who works as a camp counselor, I want kids to grow up under like practicing to be better than this generation, than my generation, so that they can move forward and hopefully help others want to do the same and go forward. And I think as a counselor, right, helping kids manage those expectations for themselves and understand that what it means to be human as well. Like realize being a role model does not mean being perfect all the time, the disclaimer that we have to put on it, but understanding that you being that person helps them. So continuing on that point, it's like, do I make a promise and do I keep a promise, right? That's what first class counselors do. If I say, hey, we're going to be here, we're going to be on time, and those promises don't need to be said out loud, right? Some of those promises are expectations that you keep. It's like, hey guys, our cabin makes a promise that we're going to follow a daily schedule. We're going to follow that schedule because that's how you keep promises, so that everyone understands that we're making a commitment to them to not be late to clinic period, so everyone knows, or not be late to our cabin challenge, or to lunch so the meal starts on time, or flagpole so we can all be here at one spot at one time. Those are unspoken but extremely important promises that a first class counselor makes and they keep, and that's important, right? And the other thing is, I think, showing that priority towards the campers, right? Letting them know that they do come first. Maybe not first as in they get whatever they want. They ask for cotton candy, they get cotton candy. But you come first as in, hey, look, there was something else that was a priority for me, and I want you to know that I'm here for you right now. Don't hold that as leverage over them. Don't be like, well, I am 20 years old and I could be on a beach roaching hot dogs with my friends and, just enjoying. No, 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 no. That's very different. It's, hey, you're my priority right now. Right now, you're where I'm meant to be. I'm meant to be here to be with you and to help you through what you're struggling with, help you through the happiness you're feeling right now. It doesn't always have to be a problem. It could be for those really great moments. I'm here for you. I'm prioritizing your success to celebrate it with you. This is our moment, buddy. We did it, right? That's important. Show them as that priority. And I think one of the really cool ones that I love is first class counselors are supportive in a way of positivity, right? And they put that into their conversation when they're talking to kids. And you'll see like really good first class counselors will, they will leave the dining hall and they will have that conversation with their kid all the way to the cabin, right? They can keep that conversation going, but that conversation is them listening. It's them taking what that camper says to them and then transferring it back to them to reinforce the positivity of that camper's well-being, their life, their outlook, and all of that. And there are some counselors that are amazing at it. I will give a shout out to a guy who was a coordinator. He was like a leadership staff member. My first summer, his name was Sean, and this man was a master at it. He would walk around with kids around camp, and the conversation he would have with them is be like, "Oh man, yeah, I'm going to see you pro one day. And when I see you go pro, I want to let you know that you're going to get me tickets, okay? Because I want to be there for the early success and the later success." And he's just having this really cool conversation with kids, but he's taking their mindset and he's letting them know what they're capable of. He's letting them get into that imagination of these really cool and fantastic things of their future, but also just being there for those little tiny moments and like the struggles where it's waking up early in the morning. He's like, oh man, I know I don't like to wake up earlier. But you know what? Sometimes I just keep my eyes shut and I just keep walking all the way to Flagpole because you know it's the first part of the day, and I just take a little nap as I'm walking. It works just fine. You want to try it with me? Let's do a nap and walk. You know, I think it's gonna work just right. The guy was just a genius in those little things, and kids would just get out of bed and be like, "Yeah, I'll sleepwalk all the way to Flagpole this morning and get like an extra 5 minutes to shut eye." Like, no, you're not. But that like amazing positivity that he has had and has of those solutions. First class counselors have that. And it's a skill you can work on. It's a skill you can build. But it means when you go up to that kid, you go, you take yourself, you take it out of that picture, and you start to become that role model. You start to be that person who is, hey, I'm counselor Oliver right now, or I'm counselor Matt, I'm counselor Sean, whoever you might be. And that means that I'm going to be this person that's not always me, but is like somebody who can be that person for my campers. And I think that's really important. And the last thing is understanding that a lot of you will come to camp and you will work at summer camp and you will make a phenomenal bond with your co-counselors, your fellow staff members, bonds that will last a lifetime. And the thing that I want to emphasize is that bond can have amazing foundation for first class counselors when they bond over how they care for their kids, right? Your staff culture can be a bonding over, you know, maybe the struggles you go through and the difficulties, but really good first class counselors, that bond comes from that positivity that I was kind of talking about with Sean, is this idea of like, oh man, like it was a struggle, it was tough, it is sometimes hard, but like that's not what I focus on. It's the, and I've told this story before of like, it's that kid who just threw up in the middle of the night, and instead of us being like, oh man, that was so, I just want to sleep, it's 2 o'clock in the morning, like why do we do this? It's like, no, they get to the dining hall the next day and they run up to their friend and be like, you will not believe what happened last night. I threw up all over the place. And my counselor was like, oh, we're going to clean this up. We're going to draw some pictures. We're going to have a great time today. It's a little throw up party, and then we're moving on. And the cool thing is the counselors are going to their friends and they're bragging about like, oh man, like my kid threw up last night, but you wouldn't even know it. Like they had such a positive time. They're bragging about this idea of being sick at 2 o'clock in the morning. And that I think is sometimes where first class counselors really shine is, they look at those struggles and they see in those bright points and they make bonds with their close over it. And you will meet camp people who have not seen each other in years, or you know, we a lot of camp professionals are friends with other camp professionals, and when we come together and at a conference or something, we run into each other, we talk to each other like old friends. Like we never even went through the camp experience on the same campground, but we can still come together and talk, and you'll be amazed the stories that those people tell each other and the way they go about telling it, because that bond is the foundation of this beautiful sacrifice that they made to go and work at camp once upon a time, and now the stories they can tell from it, the positive impacts that they make from it, and those bonds, that I mean, that's what keeps me in the camp industry, that difference that we make. So understand that's a big thing for first class counselors. All right. Those are my points for the night. Matt, you got yours in. We're finishing off this show a little bit now. And we're going to go to where we always go, which is the Eggle time, our ever growing, ever learning. And something is changing a little bit with this, Matt. Do you want to tell us a little bit about something that's changed in the world of Eggle?
Yes. I teased it at the end of our last show. If you heard the end of it, I inserted my voice a little bit to tell you about this because we were just finishing off this deal, but we are really excited that we have brought on a sponsor this year at First Class Counselors, and that is by our good friends at Ultimate Camp Resource. If you haven't been to Ultimate Camp Resource, it's literally ultimatecampresource.com, and it's got a ton of different games, skits, songs, and other activities to help, just bolster that back pocket game library that every great camp staff has in their back pocket. So make sure you check them out, and they've even got like a camp apparel store. There's like cool camp clothes and stickers. You can see them at itsacampthing.com. But for Eggle, what we're going to do is one of our Eggles is going to be a resource from Ultimate Camp Resource, because when there's over 1,000 things in there, you can literally get lost looking for stuff. So we're going to curate for you some of our favorite content in there. So it's me this week that's bringing you a resource from there, and we'll put the link to it in our show notes. There'll be some other links from Ultimate Camp Resource, but to find the full description, this one is super simple because this was a long episode, so I'm not going to go too deep. but there will be a link. The game, they have it here called Double Dice, and I've seen a couple different versions, but the way that they explain it is essentially you sit in a circle with a group of people, then there's two dice that are passed around the circle, and then there are two oven mitts and a gift or a present wrapped in the middle, wrapped in like plastic wrap or gift wrap or whatever. And the goal of the game is you roll the dice, and if you get a double, if you don't get a double, you pass the dice to the next person that keeps rolling. But once a person gets a double, they like two ones, two twos, two threes, fours, five, sixes. They jump into the middle of the circle, put the oven mitts on, and start unwrapping the gift. And whoever unwraps it first wins. But remember, the dice are still going when you're unwrapping that gift. So if I roll double sixes, then I start unwrapping it. But if the dice make it around to Oliver and he gets double twos, he comes and takes the oven mitts from me and keeps unwrapping the gift. And whoever gets it fully unwrapped first either gets the gift or wins the game, however you wanna play it. There's a couple different ones. Like I think with the oven mitts, there's a game that when you get a six, you start writing on a piece of paper the numbers 1 to 100. That's a same version of this. And if you up the ante with oven mitts, I think that's even funnier. So yeah, new game for you. So the link to that one will be posted in the show notes for you to check out and refer back to. Oliver, what's your eggle this episode?
Yeah, my shout out to Ultimate Camp Resource for coming to be a part of the podcast now. Definitely earlier and even now in my career, go in there and just gonna quick little check to refresh yourself. It's always a nice thing to have.
Yeah.
And my game is coming to you. It's called Tower Topper. I learned this one just before this summer. And it's pretty easy. You get some traffic cones and they make a circle with them, about a little more than arms width apart. And someone will stand in the middle and everybody else will claim a cone and they put their hands on top of that cone. They start chopping their feet. And then you can run and switch cones. And the person in the middle, their goal is to try and knock over one of the cones that doesn't have a hand on it during that switch. So that they can get themselves out of the circle. You can also do things like keep score. So like the more times you cross, the more points you get, all those types of things. It's a really fun one and it actually burns energy really quickly because the idea of the game is you got to keep your feet chopping the whole time, right? So when it gets started, everyone starts chopping their feet. And if anybody's ever, played a sport, we got to chop your feet. If you don't know what that means, by the way, because Matt just gave me this like really like I am Canadian.
I had a feeling that's what it was.
Yeah. It means basically just like stomping your feet up and down really quickly. So like I don't know what you would call it. It's a sports thing.
Fast feet. I don't know.
Feet. Yeah, fast feet's another way to call it. So
running in place.
You're standing in place. You're kind of running in place. Fast feet. Chop your feet is a football term, I guess, an American football term. But it gets you pretty tired pretty quickly. So it's a good one to do. And then it's a fun one. It reminds me of an old football drill, so I really enjoy it. The football drill has a little more contact to it. If we do a football-related podcast one day, then I'll bring that one up. But it's a great activity. Keeps the kids moving, and it's a lot of fun. They start smiling and laughing and all that kind of stuff. So I really enjoy it. Also, shout out. Hopefully, you guys have noticed this podcast is going a lot smoother than earlier. Oliver finally got some Wi-Fi at camp, so we won't talk poorly about the old company. We won't mention who the new one is, but we're excited. We're excited to be able to speak clearly and be heard. So
new season, new sponsor, new Wi-Fi, baby. Here we go.
Yeah.
It only took us 6 seasons.
Everywhere I go, every camp I've worked at, slow Wi-Fi. If you want to know how to get some faster Wi-Fi, private message us, and I will help you with that one. It's been good. But with that being said, that's our show. And if you enjoyed the show, we'd be so grateful you left a review wherever you were listening to this podcast. Your ratings and reviews not only tell us what you like or don't like about the show, but it helps boost the rankings so more people can find this amazing stuff we're talking about. This is episode 65, 66. I don't know. So many episodes now. That's over 60 hours of content that you can use to become a better first-class counselor. So let's close it out.
Yeah, for sure. And check out the show notes, gocampro.fcc, or they'll be in your podcast app if you're listening to that, or in the description on YouTube. Um, what would also be really helpful is that if you shared this podcast with a camp counselor friend, be like, hey, maybe it's not this episode, maybe it's another one that you really loved. But they say word of mouth is the best way for podcasts to get noticed. And, we're really grateful for you listening, and we would love to get the podcast out to even more people. So thanks in advance for telling a friend about first class counselors.
Yeah. Thanks for listening, friends. And remember, camp is camp and camp's all good.